Clark, another long three.
A shift is taking shape in women's basketball, quiet but impossible to ignore. For years, Aja Wilson stood at the center of it all, a dominant force, a champion, an MVP who defined an era of control and consistency. Then came Caitlin Clark. With deep range and record-breaking attention,
Caitlin Clark all night tonight.
Are you talking about my high school experience? Clark, cut it!
She didn't just enter the league, she expanded it. Every game felt bigger, every moment louder. And as attention began to shift, not everyone in the league's old guard was ready to share the spotlight. Now both realities exist at once, a proven champion at the top and a rising presence changing how the game is seen. And the question remains, who defines the next era? A crown no longer shared. To understand the fracture, you need to go back to 2022. Picture Aja Wilson at the absolute summit of her powers. She had the MVP trophies, plural,
Gatorade State Player of the Year, Big Ten Freshman of the Year, oh, and a two-time gold medalist. All of these belong to Caitlin Clark.
She had the championship rings with the Las Vegas Aces, shining and heavy and earned through years of dominance that nobody could question. She had the endorsement deals, the magazine covers, the television analysts calling her the greatest of her generation, without a flicker of hesitation or a moment of debate. Wilson was not just the best player in the WNBA. For a stretch of years that felt permanent, she was the WNBA. The league's identity and her identity had become the same thing, fused together so completely that separating them felt impossible. And she had no interest in letting anyone try. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who had earned the undisputed right to be the center of attention in her sport. She had the numbers, she had the hardware.
And A'ja Wilson in the passing lane. She's got numbers. And Chelsea Gray gives it right back. Defense to offense.
She had the respect of every coach, scout, and general manager in the league. There was no debate about who sat at the top of women's basketball, and Wilson had absolutely zero intention of sharing that seat with anyone. Not now, not ever. The throne was hers, and she planned on keeping it until she decided, on her own terms, to walk away. And then Caitlin Clark happened. Clark did not enter the conversation the way most prospects do. She did not quietly work through the development pipeline and wait her turn like a polite newcomer standing in line. She did not knock on the door softly and ask permission to sit at the table. She exploded into the public consciousness like a comet, leaving broken records and stunned defenders scattered in her wake across every court she touched. Suddenly, every arena she played in was selling out weeks in advance.
Bodies right through Sherrod and an early bucket for Caitlin Clark.
Tickets vanishing before most people even knew the games were scheduled. Every broadcast she touched was shattering television ratings the WNBA had chased desperately for 2 decades and never caught. Every highlight reel across every network, every social media feed, every sports bar television was dominated by her impossible 30-foot three-pointers, launched with a kind of supreme confidence and competitive fire that reminded older fans of legends they thought they would never see again. Casual fans who had never watched a single minute of women's basketball in their entire lives were now setting reminders for her games. Parents were watching with their daughters. Office workers were pulling up streams on their lunch breaks. The sport was experiencing a genuine cultural moment.
Been ice cold since that first quarter. Clark way outside. You bets!
Something rare and electric and historic. Something that should have been celebrated by every single person who loved the game. More eyes meant more money. More money meant better salaries, better facilities, better broadcasting deals, better futures for every player in the league. A rising tide was lifting every boat in the harbor, every single one. But A'ja Wilson did not celebrate. She could not. Because when she watched the coverage, when she saw the sponsorship announcements,
You want to stand for something greater? You have to run.
and the magazine features, and the way Clark's name was suddenly the first word out of every analyst's mouth before her own, something inside her shifted. Not toward partnership, not toward gratitude, not toward the recognition that this moment was bigger than any single player. It shifted toward resentment. And that shift, quiet as it was at first, would eventually cost her everything she had built. The moment jealousy became visible. Here is the thing about jealousy that A'ja Wilson apparently never learned, the thing that every person watching from the outside could see plainly, even when she could not. Jealousy never stays hidden. You can dress it up in diplomatic language. You can wrap it in motivational quotes and competitive fire and noble calls for respect and recognition. You can convince yourself that what you are feeling is righteous anger rather than wounded pride. But jealousy leaks. It always leaks. No matter how carefully you try to contain it, no matter how many layers of justification you pile on top, it seeps through every crack. And Wilson's leaked everywhere. When Clark signed a Nike shoe deal in 2024,
Caitlin Clark about to take it to the bank. The Wall Street Journal reports the basketball superstar is about to sign a Nike endorsement deal worth $28 million.
one that appeared to leapfrog Wilson's own negotiations with the brand, Wilson posted a Bible verse on social media about being patient when others find success. She never named Clark directly. She did not have to. The timing was impossible to miss, and the internet, which misses nothing, did not miss it. When Clark was named Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year for 2024,
Caitlin Clark has been named Time's Athlete of the Year.
an honor that should have been a victory for every single woman in basketball. A moment that proved the sport had arrived on the biggest stage in American media. Wilson's response was not celebration. It was not pride. It was cryptic commentary that radiated skepticism, the kind of carefully worded non-support that says more than outright criticism ever could. In interviews, she started using phrases like sustained excellence and real impact in ways that were transparently designed to draw a line between herself and the younger player. She began sharing throwback content of her own achievements with timing that was clearly calculated to overshadow Clark's biggest moments, career highlights and championship memories, positioned not as celebration of her own journey, but as a corrective, a reminder, a rebuttal to a conversation nobody had asked her to rebut. It leaked in the loaded language she used in press conferences. It leaked in the passive-aggressive social media activity that grew more pointed and more frequent as Clark's star continued to rise. It leaked in the way she would change the subject whenever reporters brought up Clark's name or asked her opinion on the phenomenon sweeping through the sport. Wilson made the fatal mistake of turning every Caitlin Clark achievement into a personal insult to her own legacy. She made Clark's success about herself rather than about the unprecedented growth of the game.
There's Caitlin Clark out of the timeout for the lead for Iowa.
She convinced herself she was defending the honor of veterans, that she was standing up for the players who had built this league brick by brick. And there was a kernel of truth in that. The history of the WNBA is the history of black women who built something extraordinary from nothing, and that history deserves its flowers, every single day. But what Wilson was actually doing, beneath the language and the cause and the moral framing, was protecting her ego from the uncomfortable reality that someone younger, someone more marketable, Someone with a different kind of gravitational pull had arrived. And the most dangerous part was not the jealousy itself. The most dangerous part was that Wilson genuinely did not believe anyone could see it. She thought the mask was holding. It was not. It was transparent. And the people who mattered most were watching with cold, professional eyes and taking very detailed notes. Built for the league, not the world. Now, this is where we get into territory that mainstream basketball media almost never touches. The kind of analysis that makes front offices uncomfortable and player agents furious. Everyone talks about Wilson's dominance. Everyone talks about her 4 MVPs, her 3 championships. Her historic 2025 season, where she became the first player in WNBA or NBA history to win the league title, Finals MVP, regular season MVP, and Defensive Player of the Year in a single campaign. On paper, her resume is untouchable. It is the kind of career that belongs in a museum case. But paper does not play basketball on an international court. And there is a fundamental problem with Wilson's game that becomes devastatingly clear when you understand how global competition actually works. A problem the WNBA system has been quietly protecting for years. Insiders call it the special whistle. Look at Wilson's free throw attempts in a typical WNBA season.
Refers a coach as Evans comes up with a steal on a loose handle from Bonner and buries the 3.
The numbers are staggering, consistently among the highest in the league, year after year after year. On the surface, that looks like the mark of an unstoppable offensive force, a player so dominant that defenders have no choice but to foul her. But when you actually break down the film, frame by frame, possession by possession, drive by drive, you see something different. You see a player who has mastered the art of initiating marginal contact and selling it to referees with theatrical precision.
Draping 20 on the dream. Already has a 40-point performance.
Every drive to the basket ends with an exaggerated motion designed to draw a whistle. Every defensive contest, no matter how clean, results in an appeal for a call. Wilson's scoring output is not built purely on skill. A significant portion of it is built on a steady stream of favorable officiating that protects star players within the WNBA system. And within that system, it works beautifully. The rules favor offensive players. The referees know who the stars are, and they protect them because the stars sell the tickets and drive the ratings. The league rewards this style of play.
Couple of disappointing finishes in the tournament, just one Final Four to show for it, as Wilson misses, but does not on the second try.
Because it creates the highlights and the storylines that keep sponsors writing checks. But FIBA referees do not care about your MVP trophies. They do not care about your endorsement portfolio or how many followers you have on Instagram or how many magazine covers you have framed in your living room. They officiate a game where physical defense is not merely permitted but expected, even encouraged. The kind of contact that sends Wilson to the free throw line a dozen times in a WNBA game earns nothing more than a play-on signal in international competition. Team USA scouts had watched Wilson in international exhibition settings, and what they saw was alarming. Her scoring efficiency did not just dip, it collapsed. When referees allowed real physical defense, when they stopped rewarding the foul-baiting techniques that fuel her domestic numbers, Wilson looked like a completely different player.
In Seattle, won a couple of championships together. Wilson sees a lane, lays it in.
Her entire offensive rhythm depends on constant stoppages and favorable calls that simply never materialize on the global stage. Take away the whistle, and you take away the engine. Now compare that to Caitlin Clark. When Clark scores, she does it in ways no referee on earth can take away. She pulls up from 30 feet and drains shots that leave defenders staring at the scoreboard in disbelief. Shots that are clean and uncontestable and utterly immune to officiating style. When defenders make contact, she does not flail or freeze or hunt for a whistle. She finishes through it. Her step-back three-pointers and her deep range are the definition of self-reliant offense. She beats you with shot selection.
Her second career start, second in a row. Clark stays red hot.
Basketball IQ and footwork, not by initiating contact and hoping someone blows a whistle. Her game translates to any court in any country under any rule book in the world because it is built on pure, fundamental skill. And that difference, that gap between a system-dependent scorer and a borderless talent, was the crack in the foundation that nobody was willing to talk about publicly, until someone had to make a roster. The roster that changed everything. When USA Basketball released the 12-player roster for the 2026 FIBA World Cup qualifiers in February, the names told a story all by themselves. Caitlin Clark was on it. Angel Reese was on it. Paige Buchers was on it. Veterans like Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, and Kalia Copper were on it. A'ja Wilson was not. Neither was Breanna Stewart. And before anyone tries to spin this as a simple rest decision, understand the full context. Yes, the selection committee cited a deliberate plan to rest certain veteran superstars and give younger players international experience. Breanna Stewart, notably, still flew to Miami to participate in a 2-day pre-tournament training camp on March 7th and 8th, mentoring the younger roster before they departed for Puerto Rico. She was resting, but still contributing, still present, still invested, still showing the kind of selfless leadership that international programs are built on. Wilson, by contrast, was nowhere near the program. Not in Miami. Not on a phone call. Not in the building. Nowhere. According to sources, Wilson's reaction when she learned her name was not on the list was explosive. The woman who had spent years convinced she was untouchable discovered in a single moment that the exact player she had worked so hard to undermine,
Bonner with 23. Gray on the drive, lays it in, plus the foul.
was being handed the platform she believed belonged to her and her alone. The meltdown reportedly lasted for days. Frantic phone calls went out to anyone within USA Basketball who might offer an explanation or reverse the decision. Her representatives scrambled to schedule emergency meetings with a coaching staff that had already moved on to evaluating the players who actually made the cut. Meanwhile, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Clark was doing what she does best. She was not posting cryptic messages or demanding explanations or calling agents or planting stories. She was playing basketball, and she was playing at a level that silenced every single question about whether her game could translate beyond the WNBA. Consider what this woman had been through. Clark had not played a competitive game in 239 days. She had suffered a right groin strain in July 2025 that derailed her sophomore WNBA season. She had battled a bone bruise in her left ankle that kept her watching from the sideline while the league moved forward. She had played only 13 games across the entire 2025 season and missed the playoffs entirely. The Indiana Fever had watched their franchise player sit and heal while the world kept spinning without her. 239 days of silence, of recovery, of waiting. And in her very first senior national team game, coming back from all of that, Clark dropped 17 points and 12 assists in just 19 minutes against Senegal. 17 and 12. In 19 minutes, the second most assists ever recorded in a FIBA World Cup qualifying game in the history of the tournament.
Team USA women's basketball just went undefeated at the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifiers. Caitlin Clark was named the tournament's MVP.
That is not a system player. That is not a product of favorable calls or star treatment or a league that bends its rules to protect its biggest names. That is a player whose talent is borderless, whose game does not shrink when the rules change, whose brilliance does not depend on a whistle or a referee's sympathy. Across 5 games, Team USA went undefeated, outscoring opponents by an average of 42 points per game. Clark led the entire tournament in assists. She shot nearly 53% from the field and 40% from beyond the arc. Head coach Kara Lawson built the offensive system around her vision and her basketball intelligence, and the team responded like an orchestra following a conductor who speaks a language everyone understands instinctively. And when the dust settled, USA Basketball handed Clark the tournament MVP award.
MVP of the tournament is Caitlin Clark.
Not as a consolation prize, not as a popularity contest, as a formal recognition that she was the best player on a team full of elite talent, on a stage where FIBA rules stripped away every advantage the WNBA's domestic system provides, where talent is not enough. International competition operates on a different frequency than anything these players experience domestically, and this is the part most casual fans never fully grasp. It is not just about raw talent or impressive statistics or how many times your name appears in the record books. It is about handling crushing pressure when your entire nation is watching and expecting nothing less than gold. It is about maintaining composure when hostile crowds are screaming in languages you do not understand and referees are making calls that feel deliberately designed to work against you. It is about representing your country with dignity and grace when cameras from around the world are capturing your every expression, your every reaction, your every moment of frustration or triumph. The Olympic stage magnifies everything. Every strength becomes more visible. Every weakness becomes more exposed. Every crack in your composure, every flash of selfishness, every moment of ego becomes a headline in 40 languages. And most importantly, it reveals the true character of every athlete who steps onto that court wearing their nation's colors. Think about this carefully. A player who cannot handle fan criticism on social media, who spirals emotionally when strangers on the internet question her accomplishments, who responds to a competitor's success with visible jealousy and barely concealed resentment instead of professional unity, is not someone you want carrying the psychological weight of American basketball on the global stage. She is not someone you want in your locker room when the pressure has never been higher and the margin for error has never been thinner. Team USA coaches understood this because they had lived it. They had seen what happens when toxic attitudes enter high-pressure international environments. They had watched championship hopes crumble, not from a lack of talent, but from a surplus of ego. They knew from painful experience that one player with a destructive attitude could poison an entire team's chemistry faster than any opponent could dream of doing on the court. And Wilson gave them all the evidence they needed, not on the court, off it. When she told Time magazine in December 2025 that the history of black women in the WNBA had been erased by the narrative around Clark's arrival,
Trust in black women and understand that we have a lot more to give, but at the same time, you got to look and see how far we've come.
she was raising a point that deserves serious, sustained discussion. The generations of black athletes who built this league from nothing, who played in front of empty arenas and for salaries that would not cover rent in most American cities, absolutely deserve recognition and respect. That history is sacred and it should be honored. But the way Wilson delivered that message, the timing, the edge, the unmistakable undercurrent of personal grievance directed at a player who had repeatedly gone out of her way to credit the women who came before her, told coaches something important. It told them Wilson could not separate the cause from the competition. Clark herself had addressed this directly when Time honored her as Athlete of the Year. She used the platform to pay tribute to the largely black stars who paved the way. She named names. She gave credit generously and specifically.
And like I said, it's only been around 25 plus years, so I know there's been so many amazing black women that have been in this league.
She did not center herself. And Wilson's response to that was to publicly claim the history was being erased anyway. That gap between what Clark actually said and how Wilson chose to frame it revealed something coaches file away in their minds and never forget. Wilson's reaction to being left off the qualifiers roster only confirmed every concern. Her immediate response was not graceful acceptance or quiet determination to prove the selectors wrong at the next opportunity. It was an emotional meltdown, frantic calls, demands for explanations, stories planted in the press about scheduling conflicts that absolutely nobody bought. Now imagine that same volatility erupting after a tough loss in a gold medal game. Imagine those frantic phone calls and that barely contained fury directed at teammates or officials on the world stage with billions watching. The coaches imagined exactly that scenario, played it out in their minds, and they wisely decided they wanted no part of it. What happens on the court is only the surface. The real shifts are quieter. Decisions made in selection rooms, in coaching meetings, in conversations that never make it to the broadcast. Because in this new era of women's basketball, talent is no longer the only currency. Influence, chemistry, and cultural gravity are beginning to reshape who gets written into the future and who gets left just outside of it. And as this balance continues to move, unnoticed by most but felt by everyone inside the game, one question remains hanging over everything that comes next. When the next roster is finalized and the next era is officially defined, are we still watching sport as it's always been played, or something far more deliberate unfolding in real time?